Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Infor's Tech TV Live Builder Hour. My name is Sam Green, and I'm a Senior Product Director for the Platform Technology Group here at Infor. I'll be the host of this session, and we'll be helping everyone get their questions answered as we go through today's demo. You may have attended our previous Tech TV Lives or Builder Hours in the past, and if you have, this format should look familiar to you. If you haven't attended one of these sessions before, I highly encourage you to check out the playlists available on our YouTube channel. In this and upcoming episodes of the Builder Hour, we'll be doing live demonstrations showing you how to leverage Infor's platform technology's capabilities. This week, I'm joined by Brandon Watson from one of Infor's partners, Tridex Systems. He'll be taking your questions and giving a demo of Infor's document management solution. If you're not familiar with how lives work, the idea is for you to engage with us and make this an interactive discussion and not just a demo. So hopefully you, our live audience, can help us create some really interesting content by using the chat function to ask questions and help direct the conversation. Before we go any further, and because this is a live session, we do need to post a disclaimer. Any number of topics may come up, including questions about the future of products, roadmaps, proposed dates, etc. So we just need to be clear that we aren't making any promises in this episode. And with that out of the way, let's get to know our expert, Brandon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon Watson, and I work at Tridex Systems. Tridex is a longtime IPN Infor Alliance Partner. I am the VP of our CloudSuite Solutions team, and I am glad to have you all here with us today. Let's say you need to send out a sales quote to your customers, and the default template that is provided by Infor does not necessarily contain the information and or structure that is needed for your customers and what they require to be sent to them. Using document output through Infor Document Management will allow any company to modify any master report template that you will be using as part of IDM and Infor OS. Today, I'm going to be using CloudSuite Distribution as the backside ERP system. However, document output is a part of IDM and Infor OS, which means that any other suite applications that you may be running in your Infor OS environment can use IDM in forms printing, emailing, and document storage. Some of these applications include, but are not limited to, Mongoose, Infor Service Management, M3, or CSDE, LN, and FSM, and many more are to come down the road. So today, I would like to show you the process of using document output and modifying the quote that you may be using inside your system. So one of the first steps here inside of our CloudSuite tenant here at Tridex, we have a default SX quote template that Infor has provided as part of CloudSuite distribution. So one of the first steps we'll want to do is open up the document and download the document as the original format. It will download a .docx Word file that can be opened with Word. But before we open that file, another item that we will need to do is to download the Word add-in for output management that Infor has created. So in your control center, you could download the output management Word add-in, which is a zip file. And in the zip file are two files, one of them being the MSI, which is the installer, and the other is an XML file that you can utilize as part of this if it doesn't work upon install. So double clicking the MSI file will open up the installer for Windows. We accept the terms and we finish the install, and that's it. So now the install has been completed on this computer. If we go back to the quote template that was downloaded from Document Management and open that up, inside of our Microsoft Word local program. First thing you'll notice is several different panes have opened that are part of the IDM output add-in. We're going to go ahead and close the validation box as that's not needed right now. And I'm going to drag this IDM settings box up here. And one of the first things that we'll want to do is log in. And you'll notice the authentication status here tells us that we need to log in.
Brandon, I'm seeing some URLs there that we need to fill out. How does a customer know what those URLs are? How do they find those?
So when you install the MSI, it should utilize the XML file settings from the environment. If I format this document, we'll be able to see the two different values that are provided with that zip file that have each of those. If a administrator downloads the MSI and sends to a user without the additional files, you could always come to the home control center and you could find the link here minus the client. And then the tenant URL is going to be the full URL from here. If you are on-prem, these of course would be different URLs and would be utilizing what you have for your on-prem environment. That's a great question. Hopefully that was answered. With the IDM service URL, you are able to verify and make sure that we are pointed to a good URL there. And then clicking the login button and the cloud identities here, I'll be able to log in my tenant. And once you are logged in your own tenant, then you'll see that the authentication status has now gone to authenticated. And the reasoning behind this will become clear as we move through this demo. In the IDM settings, there are some additional tabs that are available in here that may be purposeful for what you are doing for a specific template. You can check out the docs.infor.com in order to get more information on these two particular tabs or any of the other items that are in here today, but for the sake of time, we'll kind of breeze over those. There's also a support tab here, which allows you to get some additional logging as well as importing and exporting the IDM settings that you're using in order to potentially share with another cohort that you're working on a template with. So now that I'm authenticated here in the server settings, we will come back to Microsoft Word with no other pop-up windows open. And the first thing you'll notice is that there's now an Infor Document Management tab at the top through Microsoft Word that has different buttons, and each button will have different abilities. Of course, the settings button is where you can log in and authenticate. That is the window that we just used in the environment, along with some other buttons. We'll start out first by talking about the buttons here that have been selected. And if you notice, you select them, these three different corresponding panes will either open or close.
Brandon, we've got our first question coming through the chat, and it's regarding multi-factor authentication when they're logging into CloudSuite. Is that something you're familiar with?
I have had some issues myself with MFA along with other SSO providers. As you saw, maybe I had ADFS and Azure. I have found that using mingle identities without MFA is the only way to authenticate through the application. I have not seen any ERS or support articles about that, but that may be something we should dig into more with the Infor support team. Good question. The first pane that I'm going to be talking about is the Document Navigator. It is not used all that often in the way that I've developed the templates because it just is showing you simply where you are in the document and technically what section that you're in based upon what you have clicked over here, what you've selected. If you notice that these clicks are contextual and the fact that this corresponds to something on the document, which corresponds something on this left-hand pane, which we'll go over in a little bit. Other than that, I typically close the IDM Document Navigator tab, and then I maybe do some resizing of these tabs with the IDM Property Editor, and also over here with the content source. So reviewing the IDM Property Editor tab, you'll notice that as I click on different things in the document here, the property editor is changing what is being shown for this particular property. And if we were to look at something like requested ship date, you'll see that there's different value types down here and an input format that is able to be put in. Those are going to be different properties than a customer number, for example. So there are capabilities inside of the property editor to potentially format or change the input format of the text or characters or whatever's coming through and output it to a specific value that's readable for the end format. And it sounds like we have some issues with text being too small. I can zoom in here. Hopefully that has helped a little bit. Sam, does
Yeah,
it
I
seem
think that
small on
looks a
your
little
side?
better.
Okay.
I think that'll work.
Sorry, everyone. So now that we've reviewed these and we notice that each of the properties over here can change, there are another tab here that you can use if you know JSON code to potentially set up the JSON content for this particular control. And there's also a usage finder that you can use in conjunction with that navigator to show where in the document a particular value or control may be. Now, for the IDM content source tab over here, I'll bring it up a little bit more. Right here, you'll notice that as I hover over particular items in here, it's showing values, which is actually coming from a BOD that I've imported in here. And in order to do that, we need to import a BOD with the import button. And I already have one downloaded to my system that we can use for this quote. So a BOD is a business object document, which in this case is just an XML file that has the particular components or elements that you are looking for, like order number, order suffix, company number. All of these are what is available in the BOD and what CSD sends to IDM in order to fulfill all of the information that is able to be found in the
How do
BOD.
we find that XML document? Is that something that I download from the application, or
I will
can
be showing
monitor in the system?
later in the session on how to retrieve that. But the basis is that when CSD calls IDM to create a document, it's using JSON through an API call. And the JSON request is sent to IDM as a document, which we can gain access to and use Base64 decoding to grab the information out of there. And as mentioned, I will be showing how to do that later on. So we'll certainly circle back to that and make sure we cover that, because that is an important piece. Along with the data file tab here, we have an IDM image, which if you are logged into your tenant, you would have the capabilities of doing a search for your logos and maybe grabbing one of that logos and inserting. For the purposes of today, I know this box I have clicked on is the image, and it's going to be using a file called My Company Logo, which you could see over here on the content source in the upper left hand. It's just our Tridex's simple X that we use for our logo inside. But you do have capabilities of searching if you're logged in to the different logos you have inside of your environment. There's also some concatenation capabilities where you could take two incoming values and concatenate them into a different value that is then used inside of the spread or inside of the template. As well, there is a new-ish signature tab where you can add different recipients to sign for the document with the DocuSign integration that Infor has created with IDM. So now that we have this default template in which Infor has provided us, we know that our customer cannot necessarily use this template because they need to have specific information. One thing we're able to do in the IDM add-in is generate a test PDF. So before we go making any changes, let's do a generate test PDF and take a look at what that default template will look like. So scrolling down through here, we see all the lines, we see some totals and numbers. We see a fairly large logo and a barcode, some billing and shipping information. And, you know, one thing that I know this customer needs is something that is more understandable than the take and buy, which is RDR. My customers aren't going to necessarily know who RDR is. So one of the things that we're going to be able to do is jump back in here and change the take and buy label and the take and buy. So ensuring to right mouse click on the take and buy label and selecting remove content control along with the take and buy. We are now going to change those over to email label, which we can do by doing a search on the left and a right mouse click on the email label and inserting as plain text. So if you notice, I went ahead and put that email label in there. And then if we search for the take and buy email, we can do the same thing there. And now I've switched out the take and buy operator to the take and buy email. One thing that may not be seen so much on this remote session and me sharing it out is these kind of have two different colors now to them. And that's just a formatting thing. When you insert from the left-hand content source, it inserts them with the default settings, but we can use the format painter here to format paint that. It doesn't look like that worked for me. And now we'll know that this top one is also bold. And I can see as well the take and buy email is the same thing. So I'll go ahead and click this, format paint that. And that way, when it produces that template again, then it will be showing, you know, the like version or the like format of all the cells that are around it.
So Brandon, it looks like you're just using standard Microsoft Word formatting. Is that true?
Correct.
Is there anything special I need to know?
No, if the more you know about Word is the higher success you're going to have in doing these templates, especially in a quick manner. There are a lot of tables and nested tables and some different items that maybe not a lot of people know with Word. So there are some challenges there, but there are some great resources and videos and documentation centered around the basis of this. And also getting the default templates from Infor will help see what they've done and maybe reverse engineer what you need to do in your template.
Speaking of delivered templates, have you run into a situation where a customer has had to create their own template from scratch? And if so, how hard was that?
I would say yes to that most of our customers do need to create it from scratch. One of the things that the Infor templates don't provide is the the header section up here where you have the bill to label and all of this, that's kind of considered a header. Most of our customers like that header repeated on every page, and then the line items below that. So we actually have to use the header and footer capabilities inside of Microsoft Word to add those header sections to the header, and then the lines inside the body of that page, and whatever footer you need. So there is some things that you may need to do to create from scratch. That certainly could be the way, but hopefully, by default, the templates work for you. But it is not overly difficult, I would say, to create anything from scratch. Another thing that I know just working with the content source and inserting items as plain text is when you do that, sometimes you'll lose the XPath, the full XPath to the element that you were trying to get. If you notice, the customer over here has header labels and a /, but when it was inserted, it doesn't have the header labels here. So one thing I'm going to go ahead and do is add that. And that just has to deal with when you insert content source from an element that is outside of your nested element you're working in with the label. And as always, when you make changes in the property editor, don't forget to scroll down and apply that change. That's caused me issues in the past. So I always like to point out you may have to scroll down depending on the size of your monitor. Now, another thing that I can imagine is that the taken by operator with being 3 characters is not going to be as big as the email. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight these 2 rows, and I'm going to move this table part over to the right. And that way it has more room for the taken by email to be shown. So that's another item inside of Word. It's a table. You can click and drag and move those tables however you need to fit in the cells and data that you need.
Up in that header area, when you generated that test PDF, I saw a barcode. Is that something that is just available with the plugin? How does that work?
Yes, if you see how there's the one logo picture here in the upper left, right below that was the barcode. So if we select that property and look at the property editor, you're going to notice that it's using invoice now. So the invoice number is going to be what the barcode actually scans as. And then we have a value type here of code 128, which is a basic UPC. So I think that's a great thing to test out here while we're going through this. Let's take a look at maybe changing that to a QR. Maybe our customer only has QR scanning capable devices and not UPC.
Okay. And that looks like that's an image control. So if I want to insert a new element into my template, how do I do that from that content source?
You would be able to select in the location that you would like to insert the new image, and you can use the search to potentially find your logo that you want and insert the picture control from there.
Okay.
And I'm just going to remove that because we don't need that. And let's say another item that we need to do for this quote is a signature. And one thing I brought up is that Infor has created an integration to DocuSign. So I'm going to cover how we can add that to this project and send it to DocuSign. First, I'm just going to change it to this, right signed, with some underbars, and then date with some underbars. So now I believe I've covered most of the changes that I need for the customer. So let's go and go back to the Infor Document Management tab. generate another test PDF. Click OK here. And so here's our new quote. It's not exactly like the default template. Obviously, here we have our changes with the email and the email of the actual user coming through with the resize of the table. Logo still seems a little big. QR code seems small and squished. Everything else kind of looks exactly like the other template that we're using, but we also have our signs and date lines here. So I still think there's some adjustments that need to be changed.
Can I adjust
And
the size of that logo? Is that something that's easy to do?
absolutely, if we click on the logo here, we can uncheck the keep image size. So the image that actually came in is from IDM as an image we uploaded, which we uploaded with those specific pixel by pixel size. And that's why it is that big. So rather than using that size, let's go with something a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to resize the box. I know it's a square logo. I'm going to make something that's fairly square and can do that simply by dragging the image control into a different way. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing with the QR code because that was kind of small and squished. And let's resize that maybe so it's about the same size as our logo. And generate another test PDF. Now here you can see the image is still not big, which, as I mentioned before out loud, and it didn't seem to take effect in my own mind, is to, when you make any changes on the property editor, click apply. Now we should actually see a template with the resized logo, the resized QR code. Both of those are looking good. Everything else looks good along with the signed and date lines at the end of the quote.
Very nice. So how long would you say it takes to modify a template, kind of from start to finish that process?
I think it's going to depend on the template that you're doing and maybe how much of a template you already have. Because with the quote template here, for example, if you have all the lines in another template in a grid, you can copy and paste from one to another. So there are some, quote unquote shortcuts that you can use moving from one template to another. But if you were to do absolutely everything from scratch, it would certainly take a couple hours or potentially half a day. I've seen some templates take a lot more because they have a lot more information on them. Maybe they have a lot more calculations based upon totals, different fields, different grids. There's quite a number of items that we've had involved with our customers where it can differentiate from, not many hours to a couple of days to get the whole thing done.
Okay. Is this something that customers can do on their own, go in and make changes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a second. So we have this template that I've downloaded with the quote template. SX quote template is the name. Now, in order to actually use this inside of our backend CSD today, which is CSD, and in order to use that, we need to just save this file. And I'm going to go ahead and add custom to the end of this file. So now here in my downloads folder, I have another document that has the custom that we just saved it as. And if we go back to our Mingle tenant, back to documents here in the top right, let's go ahead and add this document. Now, in terms of CSD, we have a couple different document types. One of them is custom form templates and the SX form templates. I was in the SX form templates when I downloaded that quote. but we'll want to use the custom form templates because this is going to be a custom form for our company to use. If I were to use the standard SX form templates, I could rename it and that would be okay. But because we have this custom form templates, we're going to go ahead and use this. And we're
If
going
I'm
to
a
create.
current SX customer, do I have access to those templates today?
Yes, there is a KB out there. It's 1887404 that has attachments in the KB where you can download the IDM zip file, which contains all of these templates for CSD and the TWL templates and the labels.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So I'm going to click here to upload a document. I'm going to copy or bring in the custom template that I created. I need to enable the template down here because IDM, in order to be used, the document to be used as a template, get fed information and create a PDF, it needs to be specifically a template document. There's an attributes tab as well here that we need to fill out some information and click save. So now in our IDM, we have an SX custom form templates document type, which entails the SX quote template custom document that we just created, resized, did all of that. So on the CloudSuite distribution side, they have everything controlled through what are called AO or administrative options. And we're going to go ahead and change the administrative options to now use the new template. The document type and template name are needed. And with CSD, you do have to log out and log back in for AO changes to be read. So that's why I'm doing that. And then we're going to go to our order entry printing to where we can grab the quote that I have pre-created for this process. And we set up an acknowledgement option. I'm going to go ahead and do an email. You could do printing, email. I mean, there's several different options depending on the ERP system that you're doing. But for the purposes of today, I'm just going to email myself and hit submit. So as the perspective of this ERP, it's creating the package to be sent to IDM, calling the API, which should in turn create the quote. And inside of IDM Control Center, there's a document output job management where you can review any of the document output jobs that happen in your system. And if we see here, this is submitted by myself today at 10:33, which matches the time, and the status is okay. You can see on this left-hand side, there's a GUID for the job, where if you click that, it takes us into that document that I was talking about before. So when this loads up, we're going to have a JSON request in here that was used to submit to IDM from the ERP. If you don't know what JSON is, it's a technical language used in the transmission of REST APIs. Typically, you'll use a JSON formatted language to call a REST API, and it may respond using a same JSON formatted type document. So for the people who are knowledgeable with JSON, all of this will look pretty standard until we get up to this Base64 section, where you can see there's a bunch of random characters. And what that means is we actually have a Base64 encoded string in this JSON. And if I kind of highlight all of that and scroll down, I know that that string comes to end right there. And then we're back to the other JSON language that defines some more an additional base64 string. So to start out with, we're going to start with the type data, which is this base64 coded string at the top. And my preference is to use Visual Studio Code to base64 decode that string. And the reasoning behind base64 and the whole idea is you could take all of this text, which has, carets and slashes and all sorts of characters, and trim it down to characters and numbers, and that's it. And JSON specifically, along with many other languages, you typically have to escape certain characters. In a base64 encoded string, you put it inside of a double quote on either side, and that's it. You don't have to worry about escaped characters, and JSON will understand that. So with Visual Studio Code,
I'm seeing an element that says UPC on it. So do we have to do, depending on which type of barcode we select, do we have to do any pre-coding to support 128 or QR, or does it just take the data as it is?
It just takes the data as it is incoming for whatever the value is that's being passed. And then the control over here, let me get back to it, will have the different value types that it's going to pass on the backside. Because typically any QR code, UPC, all it is some sort of data set. So whatever data set you pass, the control for this is going to be what is put into the specific translated value type code.
Okay, perfect. So I don't need to know how QR codes are generated, how barcodes are generated. I just need to provide the data, and IDM handles all that processing for me.
Exactly. Which is a really nice feature of this. It's great you brought that up. So the quote XML file that you saw me import earlier is right here. And if you notice, if I bounce back and forth, that the data is going to be exactly the same. So for the purposes of this session, I pre-created a quote, I submitted it, I grabbed the data file, I brought it into Visual Studio Code, and I decoded it and then saved it as quote XML. And this is just an XML document that CSD sends with there's the line items, and then we have the labels all the way down at the bottom for line labels and header labels. Not all ERPs do the labels. You will have to review your documentation to see if your ERP is capable of the labels.
We'll just make a quick note. If you are an FSM customer, these XML files and the default templates are actually delivered within the FSM application itself. If you open up FSM as like an application administrator, you would be able to download these XML files and templates. So I know we're showing SX right now, but a lot of what we're seeing here is applicable to our other applications that Infor provides.
Great point. If we go back to that same JSON document management, we'll see the other base64 encoded string, and I'll go ahead and cover this for the purposes of today. We take a look at this. This is what document management, this is kind of how document management functions in general. You always have the front-facing document, and then you have the back-end attributes. So when you use the document output API, you're always going to have those two base64 encoded values in those two different sections, with one of them being the main bod and the other being the attribute bod. And here are the attributes. So if you notice, we have customer number, company number, order suffix. those will always relate to the actual document that was created. If we go back here to recently modified, here's the quote that was created from CSD. We can see the logos resized, the email, the QR code, the signed, and the date down at the bottom. So this particular document was created by printing from inside of our ERP system. And there's also a document output status button at the bottom to check to see if that was created by document output. And then we have the attributes tab here. Here are all those attributes from that XML file that I was just showing you. That's what's sent and packaged. That's kind of the two parts of IDM. You always have the front-facing documents, and you always have the needed attributes, which can be used for searching or showing documents. Now, up at the top here, we have the capabilities of adding a signature, a DocuSign signature to this file. So one thing we can do is select the signature button, which will bring up this page. And I'm gonna go ahead and send it to myself. Tell myself to please sign it and hit send. That's gonna open up a DocuSign window to where you can now take, as you can see, it preloaded that PDF, but you could take the necessary fields that are needed, drag it over to the date and signed lines that I created, and do a send. So now what we've been able to do is from within IDM, take a document, configure it, change it, make it have a signature line, and then send that through a third-party service where that third-party service can get an actual signature from a customer. So if we look at my email, I'm going to have an email for the quote, telling me to please sign the quote. I click on this. Of course, this is me clicking on it, but this would be a customer. They would have their information on this, and they'd be able to hit continue, search through the document. It's already filled in the date signed because that's how DocuSign functions. It automatically fills that in. I click the signature, which I have my own inside of DocuSign. Your customers or vendors or whoever have the capabilities of creating their own as well, and finish. Once that's finished, that will actually communicate back to IDM and be able to show the certificate chain and everything else inside of here. And if we were to click on this and refresh the status, we'll see that the status is now completed. There's a certificate download for each one of the signature files, which contains the signed PDF with the date, as well as the DocuSign certificate for the signature, which is needed for many different items on the back end to be a considered valid signature inside of a document.
So after I've sent something out for signature, can I make changes to my document?
You can make changes to the document and create a new version of the document because there is versioning inside of document management. However, if you made a change and needed a new signature, you would have to send that new document you created to DocuSign to get a new envelope, which contains the signed document and the certificate.
Okay, so changing this version would not be valid. I would have to create a new version of the document and then send it out for signature again.
That is correct. So another question that may come up if anybody's on their system and they don't notice the signature button at the top, that is because you do need to turn that on per document that is done back in the control center under administration and document type. And clicking on any one of the document types will reveal an enable document signature checkbox. Once you check that box and save the changes, excuse me, then the signature button will then show up at the top for those document types.
All right.
Any more questions? I haven't been able to watch the feed too much.
I'm not seeing too many questions in the chat. I think we've been able to answer most of them.
Okay.
But if anybody else has additional questions, I would love to see those come in.
Go ahead and move on to an additional step here. One thing that you saw in this process is the fact that it was a document being created automatically inside of IDM, and then a user had to manually go into the document, click on the signature field, and then force the signature to go over to DocuSign, fill in all that information, and manually do all the entries in order to get that to work. However, inside of Infor Document Management API, there are DocuSign APIs that are available in the system, and these are the actual ones that are used for this service. In order to get DocuSign to work in this manner, you do have to have a paid DocuSign account that allows you to call API endpoints in DocuSign for your company. And that has all been done and set up here by Tridex. And that's why it was a smooth transition, so to speak, of sending it to DocuSign, is because that was all pre-set up. All of that information will be in the docs.infor.com that's been posted and mentioned before. The item that is doing the actual send is the send API endpoint. And this is going back to the REST APIs that I had talked about. And this is an example of one. If we get the try it out button, because it's inside of the gateway and it has Swagger Doc available, we can do testing directly from here. But if we review down the JSON payload for the request, you'll see a line here called tabs. And DocuSign has created essentially anchor tabs that you can use, for example, the sign here. So in this sign here, I could use the anchor string of what I did was signed with a colon. And then that anchor string, when the API is called, it will look for signed colon, and it will automatically add the signature of the recipient, not the signature of the recipient, but that signature field I brought down in DocuSign to that line. And their anchor tabs are what allow you to do that. There's also initial here tabs, full name tabs, date sign tabs. So this is what I would use along with an anchor string of date colon, for example. And what that would allow you to do is create a more automated process using the API that's available. And if we were to kind of dive into that a little further, I'm not going to go too far in today just based upon the amount of time that I have, but we could then use Ion Desk, which every ERP will have with Infor OS, and create a data flow of some kind in order to automate this. Off the top of my head, for a document flow may not be appropriate because you sometimes have to go through creating these for each and every step. But from what I know is that when a document's created in IDM, you can have a BOD be triggered, a content document be triggered, and sent to ION. So anytime a quote comes through, let's say maybe it's for a specific customer, you could filter it out, filter it down like that. But you would have the capabilities of listening to IDM here and adding a content document to the flow, a sync to be specific. And then from there, we would have to figure out, what information we need and what is the next logical step. In this document, I know we have all of the information for the document in order to send a DocuSign, but we really don't have the document. So we'd probably have to call an API here to IDM to retrieve the document, which I've been able to do using the binary format. And that would create a binary file. And we would actually need to bring in a merge here to pass it from the API call back into the original content document as a Base64 encoded string using the scripting engine, the Python scripting, to create that. And then once we have that particular document, we could then call the DocuSign API using from IDM that we just saw, using the tabs, calling the API, putting the document with it, and having it automatically send out that quote to the appropriate person with the appropriate field and the signed line and the date signed as well appropriately on the date signed side. So I wanted to hope we had enough time to bring that up today and wanted to kind of walk through it because I know a lot of customers of ours are interested in the automated portion and how do you automate everything. So this would be somewhat an example of a short flow, data flow that could be created in order to trigger the DocuSign integration automatically with no user interaction.
Okay, that's great, Brandon. Thank you. So now I don't have to do this though, right? Like if I want to just manually send documents, is there anything I have to do on the setup side to get that to function?
To manually send documents to DocuSign?
Yeah, what kind of setup is there between IDM and DocuSign? What do I have to do as a user to be able to get that going?
You would have to create a DocuSign account on that side in order to be able to use the DocuSign APIs. Once you create that account and have things paid for, you could get a key that could be used in IDM to communicate properly with DocuSign. So the key would essentially tell IDM what company you are and what user security you're using for that API call. And then that would open up the access to allow IDM to manually interject from within IDM into DocuSign.
Okay. And it looks like we're planning on doing a video specifically on DocuSign and IDM. So be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Infor Technology, and subscribe to that. So when that video goes live, you can find more details there.
And the docs.infor.com that we pass around as well will have the information required to get DocuSign working with IDM.
Here we had one question asking about training courses for document output. We do have some courses available on campus.infor.com. So if you go in there and you search IDM, you should be able to find a couple courses covering output management. And of course, you can also use our partners like Tridex to learn about these offerings as well.
Absolutely. We do provide training, among other things, for this specifically and many other Infor OS components that we've seen here today.
All right. If there are no other questions, I think we might wrap up.
Sounds good to me.
Not seeing anything else come in through the chat. So I guess I'd just like to thank everyone for watching, providing questions during this episode. Again, we're going to post this out on YouTube so you can watch it later. We're also going to pop up a cheat sheet for IDM. So we encourage you guys to visit our channel, visit our documentation at docs.infor.com. If you have any follow-up questions to this episode or other platform technology questions, I invite you to join our communities at community.infor.com, or you can email us at platformtechnology@infor.com. And if you have any ideas for another builder hour, something you would like to see, please let us know in the comments. And finally, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and so you can stay up to date on upcoming episodes. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.